Success. Well, hold on. I don't see it saying live though.
Uh-oh.
Hold on. Now streaming live on Facebook. Okay, let me double check because that's what I always do. It's saying it now. There we go. Make sure we're all set up. Okay, I see those faces on there. And then now let me just record us. All right. Yay, success, Dan.
All right, we made it. It was a long journey.
Oh man, guys, I apologize. We're a few minutes later than normal because we are make it happen people, right, Dan?
Exactly.
We don't let life stop us. We're still going to make this happen. Whether we had to jump on our phones, this interview was happening today.
Well, I think that that's actually a pretty cool way to start, right? So we're going to talk about adversity. We're going to talk about overcoming adversity and, just thinking through like the realities of scenarios, and do you allow yourself to be defeated in the moment?
Right.
And when you do allow yourself to be defeated in the moment, then that becomes what you practice. And that becomes what you get good at. And so our mindset, my mindset was like, I don't care if we have to just use our cell phones. We're going to figure out a way to get this done because winners find a way to win.
Yeah.
What a beautiful way to kind of start our conversation today.
Exactly. We're playing to win, Dan. I mean, that's what life is all about, and I started this whole show because, I'm so excited. So for the people that are listening live, welcome. Dan Grieb is somebody that I just adore and respect and has such an amazing story. So if you're watching live with us now, lucky you. And then if you're listening later on the podcast, I'm just so excited because next week we get to be in Las Vegas together, right? And Dan,
Yes.
I've known you a long time and I've watched you from afar. And so I'm really, really, really excited to have you on as my guest today because I was interviewing you and we were setting up because we're on a panel together and you're one of the panelists that I'm facilitating Tuesday at 3:15. So come join us. It's on the Big Y. And your story, and I've always loved your story, but even having that time with you, I just want to know more and I want to share you with my world and my circle and my listeners. You're such an inspiration to me. And so what I want to do is I asked you to come be my guest today. So thank you for that. So this is a little, preview of the amazing things we're going to all be experiencing next week. And I'm always amazed, like I'm always reminded, I shouldn't say amazed, but Dan, aren't you always amazed like how many incredible people we have in our company?
Oh, it is quite amazing. And really special because what we've noticed over the last couple of years is there's been a tremendous amount of diversity that have come into Keller Williams.
Yeah.
And as the face of Keller Williams has changed, as society has changed, all it's done is made me believe in who I am even more. My beliefs became even more steadfast as a result of having exposure to other belief systems, other peoples, other cultures. When we went worldwide, Keller Williams changed, and that changed us.
And that's a beautiful thing, right? And I think we just get more and more beautiful the more diverse we are. And I think our panel on Tuesday at 3:15 is a perfect example of that, honestly, because all three of you just touched my heart in such different ways. I think you and I had some jaw drops on some of that too, and it's going to be amazing. And so what I want to share with the world though is the overcoming adversity, because playing to win, why I do it, I call it playing to win on the live, and then I edit it for the second half with Melanie Kennemann. In 2020, there was a lot of playing not to lose. And in January of 2021, I started these live interviews called Playing to Win. And I bring people on the show that I think are winning in life because, you can play not to lose. That's a completely different energy than playing to win. And you don't get it. You don't get to choose what circumstances you're born into and all the things. So Dan, you're a mega agent. Let's talk about who you are today. And then I want to like what you do today. And then I want to go back and I want to talk about your story. And then I want to touch on some of your overcoming stuff because you have some amazing stories. So you're in Orlando, right? Tell us what you do today. You're an agent, you're a mega agent, business owner.
Yeah, so I'm what I like to tell people is I'm just a real estate agent here in Orlando, Florida. I'm just a lowly, real estate agent without a college degree. And that's what I do, but what I am is I am a father. I'm a husband. I'm a leader in my community. I'm an influence for good. I'm Uncle Dan to people that don't have uncles. I'm exactly who I wanted to be. I was exactly the person that when I was a young man, I hoped would show up for me. And And that's who I am. Now, what I do is I sell real estate. I help people resolve real estate problems that they have. I do it on an institutional level. So I'm just a real estate agent, but my contemporaries, the people I work with, are division presidents of large builders. You know, they're vice president of large title companies, but I'm just a real estate agent. And it's important to say that, right? Because people see a Dan or a Ben Kenny or these mega real estate agents, and they disassociate them from them. Like, okay, this is, but you don't understand, that's this. Well, Gary Keller is just a real estate agent. You know, all of your heroes are just like you. And my goal is, in every conversation I have, is to let people know, like, hey, listen, I'm you. And if you're inspired by anything that I've done, it's only because you see it in yourself.
Yeah. I love that so much. I love that. And Gary always talks about on his tombstone, what does he want to have on there?
Real estate agent.
Real estate agent, right? Real estate agent. And so with that, I always like to set up, the majority of my listeners are mostly in real estate. I have a lot of listeners actually around the world that listen just for motivation and inspiration, which I love. But I would say the majority are real estate people. So I just want to brag on you a little bit. One thing you told me is your goal, and then I want to get into your story just so to set it up of who I'm talking to. You're just a real estate guy. I love that. And I love how you defined who you are and what you do as different things. That was beautiful. That was really good, Dan. I love what you did there. And so you sell a lot of real estate. I just want to lay the foundation is you have a big life. You sell a lot of real estate, and you're one of the most humble people I know, humble and hungry and kind and giving. And I love that. And because what I want people to realize is you can have a big life. You can have a big life and still make big impact and still live your life and be key to a lot of really important people in your life. So one of the things you told me on our interview as we were prepping for our panel is you said your goal is to make $1 million a year in just less and less time. It's not about more money for you. It's just less time, because then you can do other things. So I just want to, the audience, if they've not heard of you, they should know you. They should follow you. And you run a really solid business. And I just wanted to lay that foundation before we jump into your story.
Yeah, well, thank you. There's so much that you said there, and we're going to keep doing this. We're going to keep hearing things and making sure that we drive that point home and then go back. So the idea, first off, that you said, that you can have it all, you should have it all. I used to have a belief system, and my life is a made-for-TV movie, and there's all these different segments of my life, and we might cover some of them, cover all of them, but there was a time in my life where I didn't think I could have it. I believed that I wanted to be a great dad, I wanted to be a great husband, and you're going to hear about my childhood and why. And I looked up one day and I had accomplished that. I wanted to be a great businessman, and I had accomplished that. And I wanted to be a great follower of God, and I felt like I was accomplishing that. And I looked in the mirror and I was 300 plus pounds. And my friends would tell me, Dan, listen, you can't have it all. So what if you're a little big bone? So what if you you have a beautiful wife, your kids love you, you have a great business, you have a great relationship with God, you got it all. You can't have everything. So that. And what they call that is subtraction thinking. See, I always knew I was overweight. I knew I needed to lose weight, but I was caught in this thinking process of subtraction. Okay, so let's do some quick math here. I want to get in shape, and I've got this much time to do it. And I'm doing everything that I've wanted to do except that. So do I stop being a good dad and stop giving time to my children who really need me? Okay, can't do that. Not willing to do that. Do I stop being a great husband and showing up for my wife who's been there for me through thick and thin for decades? Well, I'm not willing to do that for my health. That would be selfish. Am I gonna give up on my business, maybe slow that down and well, I've accomplished some of my goals. The people that work for me haven't. So now their goals have to be on hold so I can get in shape. Well, I'm not gonna do that. And then my faith. So maybe I just won't go to church. Maybe I just won't read the Bible as much. Maybe I just won't practice my faith as much so I can get in shape. Well, I'm not going to do that either. So I'm caught on this cycle of I'm just never going to get in shape then, because I have these things and I was told you can't have it all. And my programming as a child was that I'm not from that side of the tracks. I don't get a perfect life. I just get the best life I can get. And I've got the best life I can get. So I snuck in the back door and I don't even think they know I'm here. So why am I going to start like demanding more? That's not of me. And that subtraction thinking stuck with me for a while. And then I was introduced to a new group of people, and they call that the hero's journey when you go through this process. And I'll explain it to you, the hero's journey, and then I'll tell you how it ended for me. So this hero's journey, if you were to look at a circle, a big circle, hero's journey starts with this concept of, I find myself in a place where I'm unhappy with my circumstances, or circumstances have been thrown upon me that I can't control. So that's called separation. So now you got to change what you were doing. You got to change who you are. You got to change where you work. You got to change the environment. You got to make a big change. Whether it's an external factor that causes it or internally, you just realize it's got to be different. And then the next thing is you meet new people. You come to a Keller Williams. You become a part of a mastermind group. You get a coach. You hang out with people that are achieving what you want to achieve. So a classic example of that is, Luke Skywalker in Star Wars, right? So Luke Skywalker goes out to work in the field and he comes back and the whole village he lives in has been killed. Everybody's dead. So he's had a separation event. And then he's like all by himself, and somehow through divine intervention or circumstance or whatever, he bumps into Obi-Wan Kenobi and he's introduced to the idea of becoming a Jedi. And then you learn a new idea. Well, that new idea is called initiation. So you have separation, and then up here on that circle, you have initiation. So you're initiated to a new tribe. You're learning new things. You're elevating your thinking, and you become something new. So Luke starts becoming a Jedi, and he masters becoming a Jedi. For me, I was introduced to a bunch of men who appeared to have it all. They had religion, they had faith, they had family, they were great husbands, they were doing good work in their community, and they were all in great shape. So I saw that, and that was my initiation. And then the last of that is the return. It's when you take that pain that you had from the separation, the initiation process you go through to become something new, and you return to do good with that thing, and it heals the brokenness that started you. And that's the story of Luke Skywalker, and that's the story of me, is I met new people and said, well, heck, if they can have it all, why can't I have it all? And if I can have it all, like, how do I do that? And that's when I broke my subtraction thinking and I got into something called addition thinking. How do I have this plus this plus this plus this? And if you're a person of faith, as I am, you got to look at that and say, okay, if you believe in a divinity, in the Christian faith, we believe that Jesus comes and dies for you. Well, if that's really the case, he didn't die so you could have an okay life. He died so you could have an unbelievable life. And that you could have it all. That was the opportunity was through that. Or if you had parents, like I have a daughter who's an immigrant from Venezuela, her coming to Venezuela was the opportunity for her children to have it all. Because if they wanted limited, if she wanted limits, she would have stayed in Venezuela. So I think that when we think about that idea of having it all, we got to be really careful, because we put ourselves in these boxes and we say, I'm just a little bit better than my parents. I'm a little bit better than my circumstances. So therefore that should be it. Like, I've done it. And then we limit the rest. And I say, no, you can have it all. And I want to be an example of that for you.
Okay. Let's just process that for a second. Like, that was so amazing. And I took a lot of notes, and I can't wait to come back and listen to this again. But the hero's journey, you call that?
Yes.
That is so beautiful. And there are so many broken people in the world, Dan, whether it's real estate or whatever, that don't believe that they can have everything. And I love how you just took that from the subtraction thinking to the addition thinking, because you do think that, like, well, if I go to the gym, I got to do less of this, or I got to be less of something else. And that's such a decision that you make in your life, what your life's going to be. But part of it starts from you believing that that's possible and that you deserve it, is what it comes down to. You being, really believing that you deserve the best life possible. And like you said, just a little bit better than your parents or whatever you're winning. Are you though? And I love that. So let's back up. Let's share some of your story because that was amazing. If anybody just listened to that, this was well worth the podcast. So let's start back. Thank you. That's beautiful. And this is why I'm so excited to have you as my guest. And now my listeners know as well who didn't know you before. So let's back it up because you had a rough upbringing. Let's go there. Tell us how life started that made you so passionate about totally changing that for your family, because that really got to me too. Let's back it up.
Yeah.
Tell
Well,
us
I
your
mean,
story.
like a lot of people, I did not grow up with a great dad. My dad went to Vietnam, came back. He was an alcoholic. He abused my mom, which was very common in the 70s and 80s, believe it or not. And my mom had to leave. Now, prior to my father joining the military, he was a amateur boxer, professional boxer.
Oh,
So
wow.
when my dad hit my mom,
Ooh.
it was like my mom getting hit by a truck. Like he would like literally knocked her teeth out. It was damage, and my father would have killed my mom had she not left. So she left and went to from believe it or not, we lived in Orlando, Florida at that time.
Oh, you were from Orlando? You were in Orlando?
Well, yeah, I was born in New York, but we were in Orlando, and we
Okay.
moved from Orlando. My mom moved from Orlando back to New York. And when she moved back to New York, she wasn't exactly welcomed by her family. They didn't like necessarily understand her circumstances. And we moved in with our grandfather, and our grandfather basically put a wall up that separated the upstairs of his house from the downstairs of his house. And we lived upstairs in 2 rooms. So there were 3 boys, my mom, and I was the middle child. And if for those that don't know what the middle child is, that means that when mom's working all the time, the older brother's in charge, and the younger brother's never done anything wrong. And then there's you. And
I
so
relate. I'm a middle child. Yes, I
yeah,
relate.
so you get it. So for me, I don't look like my brothers. My brothers are tall and skinny. I'm short and stocky. My interests and their interests are not the same. You wouldn't even actually know we were brothers by looking at the 3 of us. There's some similarities, but we don't really act or look the same. They act and look the same.
That's funny.
And I don't look like them. And I was kind of an outcast. I'm very, 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 very sensitive person. However, I've always had the ability to do hard things. I just have this internal grit in me to do hard things. And because of that, I'm often misunderstood.
Yeah.
And so growing up, what I needed more than my brothers was a father figure. I needed a father to tell me I was good enough, a father to be proud of me. And I noticed that I didn't have one. And it was very difficult for me as a child. So my mom struggled. She worked 2 jobs just to put food on the table. Me and my brothers were fighting all the time, which was me fighting with my brothers, the older one or the younger one, or both at all times. And one day, my mom was lonely. She was tired and frustrated, I'm sure. And my dad calls years after we had left and says, "I've cleaned up. I'm no longer drinking. Can I see my boys?" And my mom was saying to herself, "I don't know if this is a good idea," but she knew we needed a father, and she said yes. And now my father had relocated to North Carolina. So we were going to go for 2 weeks and spend 2 weeks with our father. And we land in North Carolina, me and my 2 brothers, and it's right near an army base. It's in Fort Bragg, North Carolina. It's called Fayetteville, North Carolina, small town, right near a major army base, Air Force base. My dad is doing work with the army, and there's tanks rolling down the streets, people jumping out of airplanes. I think it's awesome. I think it's super cool. And my brothers are like, it's too hot, and they want to go home immediately. So after the 2 weeks is up, I begged my mom if I could stay. See, my dad looked like me. He was short and stocky. He appeared to be just like me, and my brothers and him didn't laugh at the same jokes, and I did laugh at the same jokes, and I felt like I needed my dad, so I begged my mom to stay for the summer. And my mother again didn't think it was a good idea, but knew I needed a father figure, and said, "Yes, Danny, you can stay for the summer." So I stayed for the summer, and when the summer was over, my dad said, "You're not tough enough. You can't go home." And he literally ripped the phone out of the wall, didn't let me talk to my mom, and he kept me there and kidnapped me for 2 years. And
Okay, hold on. Are you at this time?
11, 12.
Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. Okay.
Yeah, well, listen,
Yeah.
I like to pause here because I know you're emotional too, and I've told this story a million times. I've traveled the world telling this story now. I would like for your audience and you, Melanie, to write this down for me, if you would. If you had a journal like this, like I have a journal, and you're taking notes, just go to the last page right here, right? And on the very last page, I want you to write down this one saying, and before I tell you it, I want to give you some context. When you're a child, your parents write your story for you. When you're a teenager, you begin to write the story with your parents. When you're an adult, you write the story. And see, I know what's going to happen at the end of my life. I already know how my story ends. And in the story of my life, it simply says this. The last page, it says this. Your story ends well. So the last page of the story of my life, I know it's going to say the story ends well. So as I get into telling the rest of my story, this season of my story, take a deep breath and understand, like, that's what needed to happen. That's okay. I'm okay with it.
Yeah.
So,
It's part of who you are today, honestly.
right, we're going to talk about that. Remind me to talk about if I had the opportunity to
Okay.
rewind it, because
Okay.
you're going to hear some pretty tough stuff here. It's rated R for violence, child abuse, drugs, craziness. So over the course of the next 2 years, my dad starts teaching me how to be tough, and he starts beating me up. He ends up breaking my eye sockets, my teeth, my ribs, and I'm in an all-black community. I'm the only white kid in an all-black community. I'm not like the people that live there. The people are not like me. And my dad would just leave me, 11, 12 years old, just leave me for days. I was in a poor neighborhood. I went to a poor school. So when I would go to school, bruised up, nobody cared. When I had act up, nobody cared. No, they didn't even care. And that was the beginning of me feeling hopeless. I really, 11, 12 years old, was asking myself, should I just kill myself? Because if I don't, my dad will. Now, my dad was remarried. And when I first went there, when I first lived with him, his wife was there and he had 2 kids with her. And I watched him punch my stepmom in the face, like punch her right in the face. I watched him and she went down. She was in the Air Force. She went down. And a big guy came up from across the street, came running over to intervene. And my dad hit him one time and knocked him out. Just as easily as he knocked out my stepmom, he knocked her out. And I'm just thinking, there is literally nobody that can save me. This man's going to kill me, and I have no way of ever leaving. She ended up leaving. The kids left. It was just me and my dad. And he would leave me for days. And I was all alone in this house, 11, 12 years old, with the neighborhood. And when I talk about diversity, another day, another time, I'll tell you that for a season of my life, I was what you would call poor Black. I was raised by someone else's grandmother. I was infused into Black culture, and I learned the beauty of Black culture. I learned the beauty. My first experience with God was taking a church bus. Only because I was hungry, I got on a church bus and they fed me. And that's when I first had an introduction to God. But over the course of these next 2 years, I lived like a semi-normal abused life. Like I played football on a recreational football team, but I was the only white kid on both teams. And I jokingly would tell people that I was, that when we would play a rival football team, that there would be 11 kids on the other team trying to kill me and only 10 guys on my team. Because I wasn't trying to kill myself.
Yeah.
So
You know what's interesting about that, Dan, real quick? You know what's interesting about that is you said with your brothers, you didn't look like them and you didn't belong and you were like the outcast with your brothers. So now you're in this situation and you're again the outcast and you're not like the people around you. So this is really interesting. I just want to point that out. Okay, keep going.
Yeah.
That's
So over the course of the next 2 years, these events occur that I now looking back, I can see like, wow, that's what needed to happen. So I'm going to give you like, I tell this story. It's another like heartbreaking story. So I would go to school and I would get in trouble. And when I went to school in North Carolina, because I went like a poor school, if you got in trouble, they would paddle you with a big ass paddle. And I get paddled like a couple times a week and I would never tell my dad. And I realized that like they would paddle you as many times until you cried and then they would stop. But like they didn't understand me. And they don't understand, like, I needed them to tell me that they loved me, or that they would hug me, or they understood me, or that I was good enough, or I was acceptable as who I was. And I was acting out because I needed attention.
Yeah.
There's a saying that I've heard as an adult that 100% was who I was as a child. And it says, those that are most unlovable are the ones that need the most love.
Boy, is that the
And I was
truth.
the most unlovable kid in class.
Yeah.
I was the biggest pain in the ass to everyone, except the ones that made me feel whole when I was in their presence. But there wasn't many. So therefore, I just acted like a jerk and misbehaved because that was the only attention I was getting. And then they would paddle me. They would paddle me. And I remember when I was young, thinking, I'm not going to cry because you can't hurt me worse than my dad. And they would paddle the shit out of me. They would beat me hard in school. And then I would never go home and tell my dad. And then one day they just gave up and said, you're going to have to write they would, instead of paddling me like the other kids, they'd paddle, they'd make me, I wouldn't cry, and they would beat me really bad. And then they would say, okay, well, we're not going to paddle. You have to write the dictionary. So as an adult,
Wow.
what I would have to do is I'd have to sit there and write every A and then like every word in the dictionary. And they would literally make me copy pages of the dictionary. Do you know now that I have the most expansive vocabulary? Anybody you know, I to this day, if somebody says a word, I'll ask them, what does that mean? And it's partially because I want to know if they know what they just said. But the other part of that is because people assign value to words that aren't actually what that word was ever supposed to mean. So, and I learned that as this
From
like
that.
broken child. And I
Yeah.
used to like read the dictionary as an outlet for my circumstances. That was my like Peter Pan, was I
Amazing.
would look up the definition of happiness or belonging
Yeah.
or caring, all these things that I did not have. And that's what I would dream about. That was my Peter Pan moment. So anyway, I ended up getting, this is just the beginning of a crazy life. So then I ended up getting saved and ended up getting to go back. I'll tell the save story another day. I ended up getting to go back to live with my mom. And when I go back, she doesn't know I'm coming. So I
You're,
just
you're how old are you at this point?
12, 13.
Okay.
I'm in that like range of
Uh-huh.
10
Starting.
to 12, somewhere in there. That's when all this happened, 9 to 12.
Okay.
So and the reason why I say range is because there's no doubt about it that I received like major concussions, and like I can remember things and then I don't really remember them all.
Yeah,
I
of course.
remember getting hit on a Monday and waking up on a Wednesday. Like that's the reality of like my childhood. So I go to be back with my mom, and my mom says, we were looking for you. We were gonna come get you. And I'm like, awesome. And now I'm completely broken. I do not feel like I'm just a shell of a person. I'm totally sensitive. I feel like no one will ever love me. I'm an unlovable person. And then my mom says, oh, and let me introduce you to your stepfather. My mom had gotten remarried. My brothers are calling this guy dad. And he's this like, I'm from New York. New York is, when I grew up, was very segregated. Irish lived here, Italians lived there, Polish people lived there, Jews lived here, Catholics lived there, Hispanics lived here, Blacks lived here. And then they're like Cubans in the Hispanic community, Cubans would live here. Puerto Ricans would live here,
Yeah.
Colombians, Dominicans, like, so it would be Hispanic, but like it would still be segregated. And that's how it was where I grew up. So my mom had married this Polish man. And this is a crazy high intellect Polish man. Super kind guy. And within the first week of me meeting him, I punch him in the face and break his nose. And so him and I don't get along. My brothers and I don't get along. I don't get along with my mom. I feel like they abandoned me. I feel like I had nothing in North Carolina, and I come back and now I have a family, but I have nothing. I have no family. They're not like me. My brothers are calling this guy dad. I can't stomach any of it. And I'm just completely wounded. And remember, I'm super sensitive. Like, I'm not a tough guy by nature, but I'm acting really tough, and I'm acting out, and I'm fighting everything.
It's your survival method. Yeah.
Yeah. So my mom had a friend who couldn't have children, and she lived down the block from us, and she went to high school together, with my mom. And my mom says, why don't you maybe go and stay with her, and you could kind of come home with us and be with her. And she just felt like this was an opportunity for this woman to kind of like give me the love that I needed that I couldn't get in my current home, and that whole dynamic. So I said, okay. And I moved in with this woman and her husband. And within 1 month of me being there, my mom kind of surprises us and catches her molesting me at 14 years old. And then my mom like beats her up in front of me, and like I got to go back to my home. So I was like,
You're not
everywhere I
safe
go,
anywhere. There's no safe place.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
So it's like no matter what I did, all of this kept reinforcing in me the fact that I was never going to amount to anything. I just was going to be just like my dad. I was just going to grow up to be a loser. I was going to do those things. So the next seminal story that I feel is necessary to tell, and I've got one more, and we'll kind of go to questions and kind of dive into this. I got two quick stories to tell you. One is a lesson on leadership. So this is an important one. My mom couldn't really afford to take me to the counseling I needed, and my stepfather really wasn't interested in paying for it. So my mom could only take me to the counseling she could afford, and we were like Catholic, so she took me to see the nuns. And I saw the nuns a couple of times, and it was kind of like I would talk to them a little bit, but my perception of God at that time was that God was good and I wasn't, and that if there was a God, and I believe there was a God, but if there was one, that he was good enough that he would come and look for me. And he would go like, and I was lost. Like in my mind, I was like in the deepest, darkest jungles, in a cave, in the most secluded places in the world. But because God was so good, he would go there and look for me. So he would go to this deep jungle, and he'd walk through this deep jungle, and he would go to this cave. And within that cave, there would be like, it would be dark and stinky, and he would walk in. And he picked the right cave because he was God and he was good. And then when he got into the cave a ways, he would enter into a series of tunnels, and he would pick the right one because he was God and he was good. And then he would have to walk through it. And then he would pick another selection of choices, and he'd have to kind of like kneel, like crunch his back to walk through it. And he would do that because he was God and he was good. And then he'd eventually find another set of tunnels, but now he got to get on his hands and knees and crawl through, and he would do that because he was God and he was good. And then he would get to another section where we'd have to crawl on his arms and like army crawling through, and there'd be like feces and rats and snakes and the dirtiest of stuff. And he would do that because he was God and he was good, and he would go through all of that. And in the deepest, darkest, furthest part of this cave, where all you could do was like crawl super low to get to me, he would get to me, but he wouldn't find me until he got face to face with me because it was so dark that he couldn't see me. And then he would get face to face with me. And when he would arrive, he would say, "Oh, it's just you, and God wouldn't want me."
Oh my gosh.
That is how I felt as a young man.
Oh my gosh.
And I
I'm
thought
so
like
sorry.
that was my life.
Yeah.
Like that was what my life was. So then when I would go to see the nuns, my fear was that like God would show up and he wouldn't want me to. So I didn't want to be there for that reason. All
Right.
of goodness would not want me either.
Yeah, because it's just another rejection that you're fearing
Yeah.
now, right? Like, who could love you at this point when everybody in life so far had shown you that you're unlovable, really, even no matter you're crying out for love in your life, and yet everywhere you go, you're experiencing a similar situation. So, how'd you get out of that?
Well, I want to tell you this lesson because like we're not done yet. A couple
Okay.
more. And then I mean, like for those that are watching, like breathe and remember the story ends well. Like
Yes.
it's hard for me to tell like that story because I can remember it. And that story is like, for me, that's like 30 years ago. It's like 25 years ago in my life, but it's still so real. And it's not, I don't show emotion because of me. I show emotion because I know there's other people like me.
So many like you. So
And they
many.
need, and they need to hear the story.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not emotional because of me, because it worked out for me. It's those that it won't work out for, and those that won't make the change, and those that won't get here. So that's the burden I feel. So anyway, and you're going to see like that's the beginning of the fire that you see burning in me around changing my family tree. So I go to see the nuns, and the nuns are there, and the nuns talk to me, and they're trying to help me. And they made one of the nuns makes a real tactical error. And this is if you value the time I've spent with you, and if you value this, I want a commitment from you and any listener that you'll take what I'm about to say super seriously and you'll apply it to your life. The tactical error that this person said was they said something to me and then they never checked back. So if you're in any level of leadership, that means if you're a parent, if you on leadership in business and community, if people look up to you at any level, then you're a leader. You always got to be careful to check back, because you may say something that's totally innocuous, which that means that like it's not meant for bad, but it can be taken that way and you don't even know it. So this is what this nun told me. Now, I spoke to the nuns for maybe a year, but I only remember one thing they said. And that one thing they said put me in a tailspin for 5 years. Took where I was and made it worse for 5 years. And this is what the nun said. She said, Danny, hurt people hurt people. Mm-hmm. So what did I at 15 years old, 14 years old hear? Here's what I heard. Your dad's a monster. You're a monster. You're going to be a monster just like your dad. Hurt people hurt people. That is not what she wanted me to hear. That's not what she intended for me to hear. But that's what I heard. So therefore, anyone for the next 4 years that told me they loved me, eject. Because the God of the universe, via a nun, just told me that I would hurt people. Now, before I felt like I was unworthy and unlovable. Now I'm a monster who's just going to hurt people the rest of my life. Like, that's worse than not being good enough. Is now you're going to go make people like, you're going to go create monsters.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
as if it were predetermined. Yeah, exactly. Mm-hmm.
Well, God just told me that. Like,
yeah.
That's what I just heard. Now, here's the leadership lesson. Anytime you have a conversation with someone where it's tenuous, where there's tension and there could be misunderstanding, you always end the conversation with this. Okay, what did you just hear me say? What did you take away from this? Because if those nuns would have said for me, okay, Danny, like, we're done for the day. What are you taking away from this? I would have probably started crying and said, you just told me I'm a monster and I'm going to hurt people just like my dad. And that nun would have probably grabbed me and hugged me and said, absolutely not, darling. I want you to know that your dad was broken. And because he was broken, he hurt you. Not because you were broken, not because he thinks less of you, not because you're broken or you're bad, or because you're not good about, because you're not redeemable, because his pain, his bad view on life is the reason he did it, not because of who you are, but because of who he is. And I would have walked out of there and probably like been changed. But because she didn't ask me that question, I walked out of there and said, nobody can love me.
Wow.
Because I will hurt them.
That is so powerful. That is so powerful. And that the power of words, right? Because what we hear, Dan, what we hear is we're all looking at life and coming from our own frame of where we are, right? We hear what we hear, and what a great example and painful and heartbreaking example of how different that conversation could have been for the trajectory of your life, let alone the next 5 years that you now went into crumble mode, right? Because of that statement that was clearly, now you as an adult can look back and say, she for sure did not mean that, and look at the damage that did for me. And it makes you really think about the power of our words. And well, I'm really glad you brought up that example, because think about the world we live in today with texting and all the things. Like, there is so much room for misinterpretation. And so going back and checking, what did you hear me say? I love that so much, because especially when somebody you know is in a place that they need you. There are so many people in the world hurting right now, and just checking in when you're helping them, because that I deal with a lot of that in my life right now. There's a lot of that, and I'm sure you do too. We gravitate towards that. Part of why we do what we do, right, is helping people come back to their light and find that. And like you said, the hero's journey, coming back to there. But that is so powerful, and that you can tell that story today. I love that. I'm so glad you shared that. But thank you for sharing that, because it's the words. It's anything in life that you do. It could be a client. It could be your kid. It could be your boyfriend, girlfriend, whatever that is. In something as simple as a little statement that was meant in a good position, how damaging that can be for people if you're not rounding up to make sure that they heard what you meant for them to hear.
That's right. That's right.
Wow.
And
That's big. Okay, so man, I could talk to you 3 hours on this
I know
episode.
this is like
You're
a
so
4 hour
good.
story. I have to give you
I
one
know.
more, but I'll do it in
So
2 minutes.
good.
One more cliffhanger, and then we'll start the journey back out of the hole. Okay.
Okay, yeah,
And make
yeah.
sure you write down that after I finish this cliffhanger, you have to ask me about my guiding 3 guiding principles I live by, and then we'll just go
Okay.
freestyle questions. Okay. And
Perfect.
I'll do it
Yep.
really fast.
Okay.
So from there, I figure out I've got to find a way to be significant because I don't want to grow up to be like my dad. And I found it in athletics. I found it in lacrosse. I became manic about lacrosse. If you understand the word manic, manic means all you think about, all you do, you are compulsed to do something to a point of mania, mental mania. I did that. I went to mental mania about mattering athletically. And in my town in New York, where I'm from, lacrosse was the mecca. It was the place where all great lacrosse players came from. So I wanted to be one of them. And you could get your name in the newspaper if you scored goals and did such things. So I'm going to shorten the story down and say I was able to do that. I became one of the best lacrosse players in my high school history, got an opportunity to be what's called an All-American, all honorable mention.
Nice.
And so now I've got an opportunity to be something. Now I'm somebody of significance. I've done something through athletics, that grit that I had inside of me, coupled with this burning desire to matter, using all of my pain to like thrust me to do what others are unwilling to do. And I'm Irish, and I grew up in an all-Irish community. And so just before my 19th birthday, knowing that I have made it, I'm going to get out of Long Island. I'm going to go to college. I'm going to play lacrosse in college. What do you think I went out and did?
Self-sabotaged.
I didn't self-sabotage, but what do Irish people do to celebrate?
They party.
I went out drinking. Now, where I grew up, again, I was always kind of a moral person, but I wasn't like, I wasn't afraid to violate the law. So I did drink and drive all the time when I was a kid because I didn't have any self-value, right? And we don't have self-value, you don't have value for others as well. So this night, I'm like, no, I'm not going to drive. I'm going to have my friend drive me, another Irish guy. He's going to drive me. I'm going to college. I'm not going to get any fights. I'm not going to get any trouble. I'm just going to get drunk with my friends, celebrate, and that'll be that. So where I grew up, like I said, it's very segregated, and there's a main road. Every town has a main road that goes through everybody else's cities. And we were on that main road at 4 o'clock in the morning, coming home from a bar, heading home. And we were in a neighborhood that was not our own. And where I grew up, the rule was if you're not in your neighborhood after dark, you could get assaulted. And we were in a neighborhood that was not our own. And someone in that neighborhood saw a bunch of white kids in a car and said something to us. And normally we would say something back. We would get in a fight. There were 4 of us. And I said, no, not today. I'm going to roll the window up. I'm getting out of here. None of that shenanigans. And I started to roll the window up. It was my car. It wasn't a very expensive car. So you literally had to roll the window up. I started rolling the window up and I was pretty drunk. And I, all like this, went from drunk to super drunk. Like, boom, everything went slow. And my head felt really hot. And my head fell down. And I looked up at Patrick, who was driving my car. And he looked at me and I just saw horror on his face. And I remember in my brain saying, why are you so busted up over he broke my window? I'm not even taking this car with me to college, so who cares? You know, that was what I said. And then as I kind of looked at Patrick, I looked up at the windshield and it is completely full of blood. They had thrown a bottle at the car and it had hit the window as I rolled it up and skipped up and hit me right behind the ear and has severed my temporal artery and I'm bleeding to death. If it wasn't for Patrick's thinking, he just took off, didn't try to like stop the bleeding, just drove as fast as he could. We were exactly the mileage away from the only hospital on Long Island, New York that could have saved my life. I needed to be in front of a neurologist who could do brain surgery right now. And there was one hospital that was a trauma center that could do brain surgery. And Patrick drove me straight to that hospital. I remember sticking all 3 of these fingers into my brain and feeling spurting coming out as we were driving and me like losing consciousness, regaining consciousness. and I lost consciousness as I got out of the car. And the next time I wake up, they're putting a catheter in me. And I lose consciousness again, and I wake up, and I literally see the white light of a surgeon and a white man looking over me, and he's got a straight razor, and he's taking the hair off of my head, like this. They have not even sedated me. That's how fast they had to start the surgery. And I look up, and he just said something to him, and then I go out. And 2 days later, I wake up, and when I wake up, everything is gone. All scholarships are gone. I missed my high school graduation. I'm now back to being nothing. Athletics are gone. Everything's gone. So at 19 years old, I'm like, how cruel is this world? How cruel if there is a God that he would take me to the mountaintop just to knock me off. Like how, and I'm thinking, I've got to just kill myself. Like there's no other plan for me than death, because everybody is suffering. My mom is losing her mind. My family are all affected. I'm sleeping on my mom's couch now. There's just nothing for me. I'm just done. And just through a bunch of circumstances, I ended up getting an opportunity to come to Florida. And I come to Florida, fast forward, and on May 5th of 1996, through circumstances, I'm introduced to a bunch of guys. These guys invite me to church. I go to a Protestant church, and I learn about Jesus. And on May 5th of 1996, I get saved. 2 weeks later, I meet my wife. My dream of being a police officer happens. I end up becoming a police officer. When I meet my wife, I literally met my wife like this at a church. College, you're at a college group, and I'm trying to condense all these stories for you for the sake of time. When you go to a college group, you have to do like a mixer where you say hello to people, and they say, go say hi to 3 people and tell them what you want to do when you graduate college. And I had this dream of the woman that I wanted to marry, a redhead that, was like wholesome and kind. And I met that girl. Her name was Stephanie Hill. And so I got to meet 3 people, and then I'm going to go hang out with Stephanie at this church. So I meet one person. Hey, what do you want to do when you grow up? They tell me, I tell them. Then I talk to another person. And then the third person is this little short brunette. She's a little thing, and I'm gotta say hi to her and say hello. And then I get to go see Stephanie. So I'm not even really paying attention to this girl. So she says, what do you want to do when you grow up? And I say, I want to be a police officer. I want to take over the world, whatever. I said, whatever. And she says, and I said, only out of courtesy, what do you want to do when you grow up? I didn't even care what her answer was. I just said out of courtesy, what do you want to do when you grow up? And I'm already looking over her head to Stephanie, and I hear her say, when I grow up, I want to be a great mom, and I want to take great care of my husband. And I went just like this. Yes, that's exactly what I'm looking for. And I married that girl. I did not go back to see Stephanie ever again.
Wow.
And from
Wow.
there on out, I'm not saying that there haven't been other valleys along the way. I have watched myself change into the person that I wanted to become. I have become something new through working on myself, through not being a victim of my circumstances, by recognizing that God gave me a capacity to deal with a lot of adversity. And because of my adversity, I have an opportunity to change my family tree. Not the opposite. I'm the one, because of my adversity, that can make it that no one else has to feel like me again in my family. And not only my family, but others that get to be in my ecosystem at any level. I get to be the man that I was searching after. And
Yeah.
and at 50 years old, I told you I would say this. If you've watched the movie Back to the Future, in Back to the Future, there's an opportunity, there's a change in history. And that change in history then changes everything. That little change changes everything. And I think about that. Like, if I could rewind my history, I would take every punch. I would lean my head into that bottle. I would not ask that nun to say something different. I would not change a moment of it, because of the amount of people I've been able to touch. Because when I look someone in the eyes and they're hopeless, and they say, I'm hopeless, and I can feel it, I can say, I know how you feel. And being who I am at 50 years old, driving a Tesla and being in these clothes or whatever, I could walk up to a homeless person and say, I know how you feel. And they look back in my eyes and they say, you do. And then I can hug them and say, my life can be an example for you. And it's been the greatest blessing I've ever had. And now my journey from here on out is to change my family tree through this conversation, change this family tree through selling real estate, change my family tree by how I treat the next person I encounter, change everything by who I become in the process. Because success is not about what you do. It's about who you become in the process. So that's a lot. I know it's a lot.
Wow, no, it's like a lot of amazing, incredible information that I'm just processing because I've always admired you and I honestly had no idea of any of that. And I just want to thank you. I just want to thank you because you know, you just don't know people's stories and you have options in life and not everybody will find that way. Not everybody will make that decision and get out of that darkness and find the place in the light like you have done. And now your whole mission in life is to bring others with you. Like that's beautiful. That is such a beautiful a gift in the world that you will share that, like finding getting out of that hopelessness like that. And that's what this playing to win is all about. And why I have the second half podcast. So the second half is about, you don't win or lose the game in the first half. I mean, we just saw it in a bunch of the football games, right? It's the second half. And that's not like your life. Imagine now what life for Dan from, you've already been doing it, but today is all we have is right this minute, Dan, is all we have. You and me right now. That's all we have right now. Imagine though the opportunity and who this story will reach and who will hear what you went through and maybe are thinking about giving it up and just throwing in the towel because they just can't take it anymore. And your story and where you are today and the impact that you make. And I know we really downplayed, but you have a really great life. I mean, you make really great money, you impact a lot of people, you have a loving family, all the things you wished for. You are so much beyond that, beyond what you ever imagined. And now when you lay at bed and in bed at night with your wife, I mean, you must just be like, do you really, do you know? Because I feel that you do, but do you feel like you're worthy of it now? Like, because I feel that from you. Like, do you believe that
Um,
about yourself?
so the answer to your question is this. I don't think that I'm worthy of it. I think I'm worthy of it because of who paid the price on my behalf.
Mm.
And that's a spiritual thing, but it's also, there's this like Christian song is like, I'm not who I think I am who you say I am. And it's the chorus says, all these reminding me that I'm not enough. Um, I say I am broken, you say I am healed. I say I am lost, you say I am found. I think I am not enough and I have fallen short. When I don't belong, you remind me that I am yours and I believe.
Mm.
And that I believe
Yeah.
what you say of me. And when you look at, like that's important. Like that idea of leadership is like, listen, I want to make an impact. I want to be somebody of value. But Melanie, I want if I bump into you in 2 years from now and I see you do something really well and I walk up to you and say, I'm proud of you. I want you to be infected by that. I want you to be bothered by that. I want you to say, man, Dan Grieb like saw me and said he was proud of me. Or Dan Grieb saw me not at my best and said, Melanie, was that your best? And you felt convicted by my presence that you weren't at your best and you leveled yourself up. But here's the question you have to ask in all areas of your life. You should say, who do I have to become that when I tell Melanie, I'm proud of you, she feels that. Because here's what we know a lot about women is that a lot of women have been said, you're beautiful by some men or have been complimented by men. And those men were not good men.
Mm-hmm.
And as a result, it actually made that woman feel dirty.
Yeah.
You think I'm pretty makes me feel bad. You think that I'm good makes me feel bad because of how bad you are. So for me, I work really hard at sharpening myself so that when I speak to someone, they can really be bothered by the fact that Dan Grieb cares about them. And remember, I'm a big on words, the concept of bothered, right? I
Yeah.
want you to be bothered by the fact that I care about you. I want you to be bothered by the fact that I would show up for you. I want you to be affected by that. But who are you going to become? Are you going to continue those models that you grew up with? Are you going to continue, the behavior that destroyed your family? Or are you going to be the one that changes it all? And it's hard, but you can do it.
You can do it. You can do it, and you're living proof of that. And I do want to get back. I want to ask you the 3 guiding principles that you want to talk about,
Yeah.
and also I love the story that you shared with me about changing your name with your wife. That was really cool. But real quick, I have to ask this one question because it would not be an episode of my show if I did not ask this one question, which is, my gosh, with your story, like again, I just appreciate you being in this world and the good that you will do and the people you will inspire, because again, there's a lot of hurt people that are hopeless, and that's a lot of why I get these stories out there. But in your opinion, wherever you want to take it, what does playing to win look like for you though? I'd love asking that question to all my guests.
Well, I mean, again, because I told you I'm a very big on words. So what I would do if you asked me that question, I would ask, what's the definition of play?
Yes,
Right?
and then I would come back to you and say whatever you want that to be, right? Whatever you want that to be, because it means totally different things to totally different people.
Yeah, you assign the value to it, but like the word play means to engage in activity, right?
Yeah.
So are you going to engage this life? So I think that if your lungs are expanding, if your heart's beating, then you are engaged in life right now. Whether by choice or not, whether you're in autopilot right now because you're going through some difficulty, or you're actually stepping towards something, you're engaged right now, voluntarily and involuntarily. So that's playing your engagement. Now, with your engagement, is your engagement to win? And then what does winning mean? See, for some people, winning is, and it's a mistake. Winning is a dollar amount. Winning is a level of notoriety. Winning is an acceptability of outside.
Mhm.
For me, playing to win is like living life as a way of gratitude. And the simplest way that I could tell you is I was the kid who was told that don't jump in that river because the water is going too fast and it'll sweep you down and drown you. And I said, no, 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 I could jump in that water. And they're like, no, don't. And like many people warned me, like men and women, young and old, like, don't do it. Like, this is dangerous. And I jumped in it anyway. And I didn't really, this is kind of like the idea in my head.
Sure.
And I jumped in the water. And guess what? As soon as I jumped in, I realized that I couldn't swim. And it immediately swept me downriver and I began to drown. And some person that I did not know jumped in and used all their strength to save me. But in the effort to use all their strength to save me, they could no longer save themselves. So now I have a responsibility. If that was a real story, and like you don't have to go religious with that, but just like you were drowning and someone else saved you and pulled you out, what would you do? Well, my thought is I would go find out who his parents were and I would thank them. And then I would find out who he was and what he did. And I would feel a responsibility to live my life for that person.
Mm.
So that's playing to win for me, is like, I'm thinking about all those people that went in front of me. I'm thinking about even like Gary Keller himself. Like, we're all Keller Williams, so everybody's got an amazing story. I have an amazing story about Gary that I can't share. I'm not going to share, but I want to let you know that that man literally put into me so much that, like, in the world of Keller Williams, anyone who says I work at Keller Williams I'll make time for it. And you want to know why? Because Gary Taylor made time for me. And the only way I could thank him was to be him.
Yeah.
So if I'm going to play to win, I'm going to spend the rest of my life being to all of those people like me, the man or woman to all those people that I needed. And I'm going to measure myself not against what I obtained, but who I could have become. And I'm not going to measure myself on the inside as opposed to someone else's outside. I'm going to measure myself up against my potential. And whenever I think I've reached my potential or I'm overwhelmed by my circumstances, I'm going to say, is my capacity for pain equal to my capacity for potential? And every time I've asked that question, I'm like, no, my potential for more is bigger. And that leads us into those 3 guiding principles. So
Okay, let's go there.
I live with 3 guiding principles. Number 1 is life is 10% about what happens and 90% about how you respond. You know, my life has 100% been about how I responded to adversity. And I've seen a lot of people not respond correctly, and it has been worse. What they did was bad, their response is worse. I've done bad things. Here's the great thing. I've done bad things, but my response has made me earn more favor because of the way I responded to the bad things I did, the mistakes I made. And that's what life is about. 10% about what happens and 90% about how you respond to what happens, whether you chose it or it arrived involuntarily to you. And then the second one is longer, and you're recording this. And if you ask me later, I'll give you it in writing. It simply says this: you were at the place at the time, experiencing what you're supposed to be experiencing, going through what you're supposed to be going through, with whom you're supposed to be going through it with, at the exact time in your life you're supposed to be going through it, as preordained by the God of the universe. Like, this conversation is not by accident. That circumstance is not by accident. And I call that your valley season moment. And when you're in the valley, ask yourself 2 questions. God, what are you preparing me for? And God, what are you attempting to teach me? And usually you'll find one of those 2 answers. And if you look back, if you can look at me as I say this, if I'm looking over my shoulder right now, Melanie,
Yeah.
and I can see my history, I can see down there is my childhood. And then I can see that valley, but then I can see that mountaintop afterwards. And then I can see my athletic achievements and me getting hit in the head with a bottle, and I can see that. And I can see the mountaintop, then I can see the valley, and then I can see the mountaintop. And from here, I can say that valley was worth it at 50 years old, and that mountaintop, because that happened because, and that wouldn't have happened had that not happened, because I was being prepared for something in that. And I became the man I am today because of this. And I personally at 50 am grateful. I'm not suggesting everybody needs to be grateful for the terrible things that have occurred in their life, but that's what I'm looking at. So think about that. And the last thing that I like to share with you simply is this. It says this: today's the first day of the rest of your life. Today's when it all starts coming together. It doesn't matter if you blew it in marriage, like today's the day you start finding the person you need to be with. It doesn't matter if you've been overweight for a decade. Today's the day you start getting in shape. And that body that you want, today's the day you start getting that. Today's the day you turn that real estate business around. Today's the first day of you becoming that person. If you still have air in your lungs, your heart is still beating, like, you can get there. And we think like it's going to be some tremendous amount of time that has to go by. And that may not be the plan. It may happen a lot quicker than you think, but you just got to get into momentum of it and believing. Well, Dan, what do I do? Like, I messed up yesterday. What do I do today? Well, just do the next right thing. Well, what do I do after that? The next right thing. What do I do after that? Just do the next right thing. What do I do after that? The next right thing. What do I do after that? The next right thing. And then when you look behind you, you have like a history of just doing the right things, and they compound over time. When you look at my life versus my brother's lives, my brothers are exactly like our father. They grew up to be just like him. They're alcoholics, estranged from their children, divorced, problematic, domestic violence, all of that. And what separated me from them? One decision compounded over time. This decision compounded over time. This decision compounded over time. And then when you take that decision, you compound it over 10 years. This year, I'll be 50 years old. I will celebrate 25 years of marriage this year.
Congratulations.
Half of my life, I will have been married. I have 2 biological children, and you can invite me back to tell you the beautiful story about how my wife and I lost a child to a late-term miscarriage. And then as a result, adopted a 19-year-old Venezuelan girl. And we have a daughter that came to us at the exact time in our life. And it was how we handled the adversity of life is 10% of what happens, 90% how you respond. We lost a child and said, we're not going to get bitter. We're going to just go find a way. We don't know how, but God will one day show this for good. And 19 years later, we adopted our beautiful girl, Claudia. And she's been literally the light of my life in the last 6 years. Been just so beautiful. It was all born in adversity.
Yeah.
And that's my request of those that listen to this is, if you do not have guiding principles, adopt mine. And if you don't have guiding principles and you adopt mine, like, go with them until you have your own. And then when you have your own, go with those. If there's anything that I've said on this call today that has shaken you, call me. I'll talk to you. I'll be at family reunion. Just pull me to the side and we'll talk about it. I'd be happy to. If you're in Orlando and you want to spend time with me, do it. I have a pretty good real estate business. I have a pretty good business acumen. I was able to do that and overcome my adversity. And when you talk about, like in the Keller Williams world, we're big on education, right? So we teach about models and systems and processes. And like, again, I'm a definition guy. So like, what's the definition of a model, right? So a model in a business world is like this three-dimensional representation of something, right?
Yeah.
And I say a model is also like a person. Like the difference sometimes between where you are and where you want to go is that relationship. So if you feel like, hey, Dan, like I'm missing a little something and I'm in real estate, I want to be like you, fly to Orlando and spend a day with me. Wake up with me, have breakfast, lunch, dinner with me, meet my family. I'm down for it. Like, come and see it. Like, see a model of what's possible in front of you. The invitation's open.
That is so beautiful. That is so good. And that's so good. And how many people will actually take you up on that? I want to see. And when you have to let me know if they heard it from the podcast, okay? You have to let me know, hey, this person heard this story. They're from Austin or wherever, because we have listeners everywhere. I don't know where to even take this from there, because this was so, I mean, we were like, this will be my longest episode and I could go like 3 more hours with you. This is so fantastic. Like, your story is so inspirational. And I just want to thank you so much for sharing all that. And just who you are today is an inspiration, because again, there's so many people that are at that point of they want to give up, and there's so much more. And I love your principles. Like, I love that all of them, but especially that the last one is today's the first day of the rest of your life, whatever that is in your life. And it's a decision. And that's what people don't realize, that they actually have a choice. They have a choice. And I talk a lot about, and I heard Diane, I was at Diana Kokoska's book launch here in Austin a couple months ago. And she did the whole, B and D, like the day you're born, the day you die. And there's a line between, we all call it the dash, right? But there's also a letter there, and it's letter C, because it's BCD, right? C stands for choice. And C stands for choice. And I love how you said, as a child, your parents really make your reality, right? And tell your story and all the things, but and then you start finding your way in your teens. But as an adult, it's your choice. It's your choice, and there are ways to get out of it if you're stuck. And if you're stuck in that past, I've done a lot of work on this for myself, and I pull a lot of people along the way with me, because you don't have to stay there. And the power of loving yourself, loving others, getting out of that, believing in yourself, is transformational. And you have no idea the impact that you can make on somebody else. And all those painful stories and horrible things that have happened to you make who you are today. That's why you are who you are today, Dan. You are, and that's so mind-blowing to me, that on your story about, not want to be like your dad and all the things, and you're not, you're opposite of who, you're opposite. And yet the others that didn't really resist it kind of turned into that. It's living in consciousness. It's living in consciousness and awareness of, do I even like you had said, are you just on autopilot? Are you just living your life on autopilot? And a lot of us do, because it's just, or we have a survival. We don't let the feeling in. We don't really let people in. We don't love fully because we're afraid of being hurt, or maybe we're not worthy, whatever that is. It's not that you just deserve it, but it's like your duty to live your best lives. Like you said, you know, all this was not sacrificed or whatever in life to just have a mediocre life or just an okay life. It's to have your best life. And that's exactly why I do stuff like this and have guests like this, because I believe that there's always a way and there's always a new day and there's always a new decision you can make if you don't like where you are. And your story, man, I mean, I knew it'd be good. And we didn't even get to the whole Iron Man that you did with that young man with Down syndrome, that you changed that whole thing. We'll have to have you back again. I don't know if you want to touch on that at all, but I just want to thank you for sharing your story. I think you've got. I hope that you share this with a lot of people. I mean, this is a book in the making, a story in the making of what's possible. That's what I love about your story. What's possible, Dan?
Yeah, I will. I mean, yeah. Listen. This required no energy, and I've been blessed to be paid to travel the world to tell the story, and you know, I guess the best thing I can say, like as we kind of start wrapping up here, and for those that hear this, is that perfection is overrated and it's actually not true. You know, I want to say, you know, I have to be careful because like my behavioral style is direct and I'm working really hard. So let me tell you one, I'll end it with one cool story, okay?
Okay.
So I have a million of these Danisms, and listen, I'm down for doing this again. I want to come to Austin for a reason. So if you'll host me to speak there and you get a group together, I would like to spend half the day, you know, 2 hours talking about my life story, but 2 hours talking about what I'm about to go into next. So, you know, these bookshelves have no books on them anymore. I gave them all away just recently. I used to have thousands of books, and on the bookshelves, I would call my books not books. These are my mentors who I would stand in front of and I would say, I'm scared. I don't know how to be a great father. And I would pull one of them down and I would say, teach me. I'm scared. I don't know how to manage my money. And I would pull down Dave Ramsey's book and I would say, teach me. And I would not allow them to be on these shelves if I wasn't willing to listen to them. And so I read this book about 3 years ago, 4 years ago. And the book is about, it's called Mr. Schmooze. And it's about this gentleman who gives for a living. And the title of it is The Art and Science of Selling Through Relationships. And this guy doesn't know the difference between deal friends and real friends. He just treats everybody with dignity and love and attracts people to him. He doesn't monetize people. And they refer to him in the book as Mr. Schmooze. When I read this book, again, I'm not healed from my issues. I sometimes feel like still, and it's funny, I say this, I'm being honest, I feel like I'm an unlikable person sometimes. I just feel like I'm too tactical, I'm not enough relational, and I feel unlikable. Not unlovable, unlikable. Like I'm not good at relationships. So I read this book and I was like, I want to become Mr. Schmooze. I don't want to be Mr. Schmooze. I want to become him. But here's the deal. Remember, and I'm going to try to narrow this down. Leadership is three things. Number one, how you manage yourself. Number two, how you manage in your family, comma, big comma, where it counts. And number three, how you manage in your business and community where it's just practice. So when I was looking at this book and I'm like, I want to be Mr. Schmooze so I can be better at business. But actually, I want the experience of being my wife to be better. I want the experience of being my child to be better. I want the experience of being my employee better. So I'm going to practice this with real estate, just like I've practiced leadership with real estate, so I can become better at it. So I called the author up. His name is Richard Abraham. And I called him up and said, Richard, my name is Dan Grieb. I read your book. I'm really impacted by it. Not the first time I've called an author of a book up, and said, I need you to help me become Mr. Schmooze. And he was like, I'm 71 years old. I'm retired. Mr. Schmooze has everything you need. I don't think I need to tell you who to become. And I'm like, okay, Richard. And I want to become Mr. Schmooze, and you've got to coach me.
That's funny.
So he thought about it, and Richard Abraham has been coaching me on Mr. Schmooze for the last 7-8 months. And and just this week, him and I have talked about the possibility of him allowing me to rewrite it with Mr. Schmooze 2.0. And I want to become this Mr. Schmooze person. I don't want to be this secret agent, lover of people. I want to be this outwardly lover of people.
Yeah.
While yet while yet still making a difference in the world. And so I'd like to come to Austin in the next couple of months and talk about my life a little bit, the baseline of where I am, and then talk about how I've used that to turn from Dennis the Menace to Dan the Magnificent. And how you can too, and how others can. And here's a roadmap of how to do that
Love
in
that.
relationships.
Yeah, I love that.
Um,
Let's do it.
it might sound like a business book, and Richard may tell you that it was written as a business book. I read it as how to become a better husband, how to become a better father, how to be a better member of your community. Oh, and by the way, you can be better at business too.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think that's where we'll
Let's
leave
do
it.
it. We're gonna do it. We'll
All
do it.
right.
We'll
In
make it
terms
happen.
of follow up to me, I mean, I'm happy to give out my cell phone number. That's super easy, and I'll do that.
Okay.
You can give it out. It's 407-923-1122. The only problem with text messages is so many come in, and then you can't really go back to like see who you answered and did it. So anybody can call me, or you can email me, dan@hometosell.com, HOMETOSELL.com. But the best way is just go to Instagram and send me an Instagram message. Follow me because you get to see like the life of Dan Grieb. But also send me a message because I get to see your photo. And then if I don't respond, I know I didn't respond. And my goal is to respond to 100% of the people that reach out to me.
I love
And
that. What are you, is it under
to
your
then move
name
that
on it?
on to a regular conversation.
Is that on under your name on Instagram or what's it
Yeah, I
under?
think it's Dan Grieb or D Grieb, but let me look real
Okay,
quick.
so it's your name. Okay, perfect. Okay, awesome. That is amazing. Well, I love this. It was so good, and I just loved every minute of this. I just again thank you for sharing, and we will plan that. So those of us in Austin, I'm a big loud person about anything we're doing, so we will get that on the calendar. And I will see you in Vegas next week, my friend. So join us Tuesday at 3:15 for the big why conversation. Because as you can see, this was just a little piece of it, and we have three amazing guests. So I hope that some of you will join us there. And Dan, thank you so much for being my guest today and all
God
you
bless
do.
you all. Thank you so much.
All right, I'll see you in Vegas, my friend.
You got it. God bless. Bye bye.
All right, thank you. Bye-bye.